What inspired you to become a reporter?
What inspired me to become a reporter? Well, before I was a reporter, I was a student getting a broadcasting degree. And my degree is from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And I was on the student staff of WBAA, Purdue's radio station, which goes back to 1922. And we had to learn to do everything. I mean, we had to learn to write and to present programs and to come up with ideas for programs, and we just had to learn everything there could be done for a broadcaster, as well as much on the air. So to define it about being just a reporter came later in my professional career when I first started at Channel 5, WBAP TV. It was doing everything. And as time went on, I got my own program, 30-minute daily program, called Dateline, and way ahead of NBC's Dateline. And then as time went on, I was moved from the program department at WBAP TV to the news department. And then I was officially declared a reporter. So it kind of found me instead of me finding it.
What was it like, I'm curious, for you being a woman in this industry, especially when you were getting started?
When I was getting started, there were not very many women in the business. And, of course, I started with WBAP TV Channel 5 2 weeks before it went on the air in 1948. Now, don't bother doing the math. I've been doing this 70 years. I'll save you the problem. In the beginning, we were just doing everything. And because I had a degree in broadcasting, and most of the people who came in came from all different backgrounds. And because I had a little bit more education in the broadcasting business than most of them, I was not discriminated against. I mean, I was just part of the team. I was accepted. Maybe it's because my name was Bobbie. But I didn't really, at my station, and I've been with that one station all these 70 years, I was never discriminated against as far as being a woman. Now, the discrimination came, and it wasn't just our station, it was just the world in general. The discrimination came in pay. I was never paid as much as the men. And yes, that used to bug me. But at the same time, I was getting to do the work I liked. So rather than then saying, oh, well, if you don't like the work, get out, I wasn't willing to risk that. So I just, went on doing the work that I liked. And fortunately, I was given a lot of latitude. I was allowed to be innovative and just a lot of freedom to do the job.
What advice would you give to aspiring broadcaster reporters now?
For broadcasting reporters now, it's a whole different world. We thought we were pretty technical back in the 1948 and the 50s and 60s, and of course the business was constantly changing. In 1954, when we moved from black and white to full-time color. I mean, we were constantly going through technical changes, but the business now is even more erratic in that respect. Well, look at your iPhones, for goodness sake. Every 6 months, they got to come out with a new one. Of course, that's just hook us all into buying a new telephone, isn't it? But being fair to them, they do bring new technology with each update. So I would say to a young person now wanting to get into broadcasting, let's say you want to do your goal was to be a TV news reporter, then I would say get the education, check around and get the best setup and the best lab, so to speak, that you can find, that you can afford or your parents can afford, and make the most of the time. Just really, I went through college and got my degree in 2 years and 7 months. And I don't recommend everybody do that. But the point is, you have to be serious about it. And if you're just playing with it, then, you know, the serious students are going to pass you by. But I would say be serious about it. Get as much education as you can. If you can get some kind of a little job on the side, just working in a newsroom, being any kind of a gopher or whatever, absorb the business and observe it. And then you will see, oh, I liked that job. I never thought about being an editor. Well, I might like to be an editor. And I'm talking about editing. Now it's digital. Used to be film and tape. It's more digital now than those things. But I would just say get serious about it. It's not playing. Get the best and most education you can get, and try to get in as an intern someplace, or just any kind of a connection you have that'll get you into a station, preferably into the newsroom if you want to be a reporter, and just be observant and lay a good foundation.
Why did you decide to write this memoir, Talking to the Stars?
I have to laugh when people say, "Why? How did you decide to write this memoir?" I knew as much as 10 or 15 years ago that I should do it, because I've been very privileged to be in this business from the get-go, certainly my station from the get-go, and allowed to do many different kinds of things, starting in the program department, moving into the news department. I've had many opportunities and received some recognition for my work. And I just knew that for the longevity of it, I should, make a record of it somehow, a book. And also, being a woman in the industry, I owed it to my fellow women who are in the business or trying to get into the business. Besides that, a very dear friend, Betty Bob Buckley, was constantly on my back about it. She, too, is a journalism major out of UTA, and she kept telling me, "Bobbie, you got to write this book." And I really thought a lot about it. I even jotted little notes of things that should go in the book. But it was very difficult for me to continue my job and take on a project like writing a memoir that was going to cover 60, 70 years of my life and my career. So it wasn't until a few years ago that the opportunity presented itself. And that opportunity was TCU Press saying, "We would like to publish your memoir." And through my friendship and long association with Christina Potosky, who is our photographic editor for this book, Talking to the Stars, Christina really then moved in. We got to do this, and suddenly I was committed to writing a book. And I remember the first meeting we came to, Christina said, now we're just going to talk to these people and see. And we walked out 2 hours later, and the talk was, well, now when we do this, and TCU Press people were all saying, and we'll do this, and suddenly when I got to the car, I said to Christina, now what was this about? We're just going to sit and listen and see what their ideas are. Anyway, again, it found me. I didn't find it. And then we got serious about writing the book.
Would you share with us some of your favorite celebrity anecdotes?
Oh boy, where do I start? Favorite celebrity anecdotes. Well, the person I interviewed the most times over a period of many years was Bob Hope. And he came into this area a lot. He had a lot of friends here, and he had a lot of business associations here. With SMU, SMU built a little theater and named it the Bob Hope Theater. Of course, he had given them, I think, $1 million, kind of, paved the way. But every time he would come into town, either he would call or someone of his people would call and say, Bob's coming and he would like to talk with you if you have time. He always had something coming out, a new show or something that he wanted to talk about. And most of the interviews were done on golf courses. I remember one time we were at Preston Trails Country Club, and so we met there in front of the clubhouse, and he said, we can't do the interview here. There's too much confusion and everything. So he got a golf cart, and he said, we'll just go across the way there and set up and do the interview. So my photographer took off on his own, and I was in the cart with Bob and with Jimmy Chambers, who was the publisher of the Dallas Times-Herald, and a big guy, could have been cowboy on the Cowboys' front line, who was the caddy. He was riding on the back. And so we take off, and Bob's driving the cart. And he just whoosh, and across the greens, and suddenly we could see that there was a big drop-off. I mean, we were up here, and it was going to drop off. And fortunately, the caddy riding on the back, being a big heavyweight, he managed to steady the cart so that we didn't end up in the trees. But it was always an adventure to interview Bob Hope.
Imagine. So I heard you speaking briefly before that you recently got to interview Bradley Cooper. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, Bradley Cooper is one of the more recent ones I've done. I had not met him because actually for about the last 10 or 12 years, I've been on a part-time basis with WBAP, which is now KXAS TV, NBC5. We have so many names. I have to get them in the proper order. But he was coming into town for his new movie, A Star is Born. And that's a movie that's been made, well, he was making the 4th edition of A Star is Born. And he was coming in town, so I was able to do an interview with him. This was his debut as a director, too. So there was a lot to talk about. And as happens now, it used to be we would have a star interview and maybe get 10 minutes or so. And when they cut us back to 7 or 8, we said, oh, come on, We were press all just really upset about being cut back to that. But anyway, this one we were told we would get 3 minutes. and in caps, big caps, you get 3 minutes only 3 minutes. Well, we get there to do the interview, and lo and behold, it's Bradley with one of the cast members. Now they said you get 4, and we turn off the cameras at 5. So, welcome to television.
Can you think of a celebrity or any celebrities who were a lot different from what you expected them to be like?
You know, when they come to us on camera, when they're promoting a film or whatever, a show, they've got the game face on, you know, and you don't spend enough time with them to really get to know them. But a few stars that I felt like I did get to know a little bit, besides Bob Hope, I must have done, I don't know, 50 or more interviews. Bob used to say, "You've got enough stuff on me to do a 52-week series." But aside from Bob, I got to know John Travolta through a number of interviews, and John was always off camera. I would watch him with the way he was to other people. He was always a very nice person, friendly, considerate, the kind of guy that you'd think, yeah, you know, he would be a nice friend. But as I say, most of them, when they're around us, they've got their game faces on, and you don't spend enough time with them to really get to know them.
Bob Schieffer wrote the foreword to your book. Could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with him?
Bob Schieffer and I go back a long, long ways, right back to TCU, actually. My husband was asked by Dr. Jim Costi, who was head of your theater department at that time, to be in a summer production of My Three Angels. And it's not that my husband, he'd done some acting, but he never aspired to be an actor. My husband was in television as well, and with Channel 5 in various jobs, but starting as the lighting director, moved on to being a director, who moved on to being a production manager, and his last job with the station was promotion director. So he kind of ran the gamut from the workabees up here to management. My husband was to do My Three Angels, along with 2 other men, and Bob Costi wanted guys that were older than college age. He didn't want the roles to be college students. But in that production was Bob Schieffer, and he played the young lieutenant, the kind of the romantic interest, as it were. And I came to a couple of rehearsals and got to know Bob a little bit, and then I knew him slightly, just to say hi, when he was a reporter at the Star Telegram. But when he came back from his tour of Vietnam, and he really had done such a wonderful job of reporting there, that I called him. I was doing a daily talk show at the time, and I called Bob and said, "Would you come and let me do an interview with you and bring some of your pictures?" And so he came, and he just went through that like he had done television all his life, and he had the presence, and he was just did a superb job. So after he left, I went to our news director, James A. Byron at the time, and Mr. Byron, you need to look at that tape. And I knew that he knew Bob Schieffer. And I said, and see what Bob Schieffer had done. He did, and the next thing we knew, Bob Schieffer had quit the Star Telegram and was a reporter for Channel 5 and ultimately the 6 o'clock anchor. So Bob and I go back a long ways, and he's in 3 of his books that he's written, he has given me credit for discovering him. But believe me, he was just a TV guy waiting to be discovered. I just gave him a chance to be in front of the camera.
Well, looking back on your very impressive career, what were some of the milestone moments that you sort of look back on in your journey?
Well, the biggest thing that happened to me, the biggest thing that has happened to me, I should say, in my 70 years, was the day of the Kennedy assassination, because I was on live. And when we started the program, I was told to tell the audience that we had reporters and cameramen on hand for the parade. But if they got to the Trade Mart before the scheduled time, which was 1 o'clock, that we would cut immediately to the coverage. We had live coverage at the Trade Mart. The parade we were doing on film. It wasn't like it is now, where you can just instantly cut, to Nairobi and get a live shot. It wasn't like that then. So we were going to be live once they got to the Trade Mart, but we were on film for the parade. So I was told that, if we suddenly disappear, it will be because they get to the Trade Mart before schedule. But then the program was interrupted by an announcement from the parade area saying our Bob Welch, our reporter or one of our cameramen on hand, said sounds that could have been shots were heard in the vicinity of the Kennedy motorcade. And so that was the beginning of our show being interrupted while they would bring these announcements. And I don't know how many times we were interrupted, because of course there was no tape made of the program, but it was like, every minute or two they were interrupting us, and they would say to me, "Bobbie, pick up where you left off and go on." And so in between those announcements coming from the parade and ultimately at the hospital, I was having to carry on interviews. My 2 interviews that day, one was Ray McKinley, who was a Fort Worth guy who was a big band leader, and he was back in town for a big dance that was going to be where he and his band would be playing that night. And the second interview was Mr. Tomlinson, who was head of All Church Press. And fortunately, I had 2 people who kept their cool and made my job easier, because they didn't go to pieces. But that would have to be the biggest thing that has happened to me in all of my years of being on camera.
What are some big lessons that you've learned as a professional in your field? What were some of the big lessons you've learned or highlights that you look back on?
People often ask me, how in the world did you stay one place for 70 years? and under 3 different ownerships. Our first owners were the Star Telegram, Carter Publications. Then we were bought by an Eastern firm, broadcasting firm, Lin, L-I-N, Television, and then we were purchased by the NBC network. And we are currently owned by Comcast and NBC. Comcast being the parent company of NBC. So I've worked under a family-owned corporation that treated employees as family, and then Lynn Broadcasting, as we would say it sometimes behind their backs, the big noise from the East. I may regret saying that someday, but that's what we call them, the big noise from the East. But there were some good things about Lynn. I learned a lot about the broadcasting industry from Lynn. And some of the people, the Lynn people, I liked very much, and some I didn't like very much. But even working for different news directors that I didn't particularly like, I learned to just concentrate on the job and do the job to your satisfaction. I remember one time during the Lynn time, they were saying that we absolutely couldn't work more than our 8 hours, or 48 hours a week. And of course, in the newsroom, story breaks, and you just, oh, I'm sorry, it's 5 o'clock, I have to leave, you know. You don't do that. You just don't do it. And anyway, they were getting very strict about it. So I remember the first time that I tried to get all the work finished to my satisfaction, but I had to hurry on the last thing that I was doing, and I didn't have time to go back and tweak it and really make it better than it was, and, you know, I got out of there. And then I saw it on the air, and I knew what it could have been, and it was okay. It wasn't that it was sloppy or incorrect. And I just went back the next day, and I told the guy, I can't work like that. I said, you know, we have to just make some kind of rule here that I can stay until I feel like I want to leave. If I'm not complaining, why should you? So there were others who felt the same way. But I learned a lot from that. And then when NBC bought us, that's been, you know, that's been like going from a bachelor's to a master's degree to work for NBC. And so I would say to young people, it doesn't go smoothly, but just concentrate on the work and be satisfied that your work is still good. And if they can't see that, or and you have to be able to adjust to what they want. Sometimes they want it this way, and you're used to doing it this way. Well, try their way. It might have some benefits to it, but you just and getting along with fellow workers. I've seen some people who just can't get along with their fellow workers. And that won't get you any brownie points with the boss.
Those are all the questions. Do y'all have any questions you want to throw out there?
There's one anecdote that I really liked in the book, and it is about Bob Hope. But it's when you got out of the golf course with him and you were wearing high heels. Remember that?
One of the earliest experiences I had with Bob Hope, he and Dolores, his wife, had a little press gathering at their home in North Hollywood. And part of that home was a one-hole golf course. It had been 3 holes, but he sold off 2 of them. And so, you know, we were all out there and watching Bob hit a few golf balls and other people. And finally Bob looked at me and he says, Bobbie, he said, come over here and let's see you hit a few balls. No. I said, I've never had a golf club in my hands. I don't know anything about that. And he said, no, come on. And I said, look, I've got on a tight skirt and high heels. And he said, come over here. So I went over and he put the club in my hands. And he said, now, forget about the ball. Just bring the club back and over your shoulders and swing it around. And just get the feel of the club. So I bring it around, and somehow it connected with the ball, and the ball went sailing and landed about a foot from the hole, from the pin. And Bob, his eyes got big, and he looks around, and he said, "Well, that does it. Tomorrow, high heels on all my golf shoes."